Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. Welcome back to the summer season, and again I am digging into my vault to find some gems to share with you. And this week I have one of our most popular podcast episodes ever, all about midlife sex. And I am interviewing Dr. Sonia Wright. She is the Midlife Sex Coach. She's a medical doctor, a radiologist, a life coach, and tremendous fun. And we get into the nitty-gritty of what goes on in midlife, the impact of menopause, and how to make sex wonderful at any age, but especially in midlife. So please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Sonia Wright. I'm really excited to get to talk to you, Sonia, and to learn lots about midlife sex too. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Rachel. I'm so excited to be here. We are going to have fun today.
I think so. I really do think so. I was sharing some secrets before I hit record, so we're going to be, yes, I think we will have some fun. But first off, it honestly, it seems to me like you've had the ultimate midlife reinvention. So how did you go from being a radiologist, and you still are, aren't you, I think, if that's correct, to becoming a sex coach?
Yeah, it's a fun process. This is what I love about midlife. We get to a place in our life where we sit and we think, is this all that we want to do? And then you start thinking, what legacy do I want to carry on? What do I want to give? There will be a time where I'm no longer on this earth. What do I want to make sure that I've contributed to this world, right? So I am a radiologist. I'm a pediatric radiologist, and I love my job. But I wanted to do more. And so in 2016, I started training as a life coach. And originally I was a life coach for physicians, and I was taking on that area. And the more and more I would talk to my clients, they would tell me that there was more intimacy issues, right? And by this time I was working with physicians and I was working with other women, and they would think because I'm a doctor that I would have all the answers. Honestly, physicians are not trained very much when it comes to sexual intimacy and how to actually deal with any difficulties that might come up. So I was Googling right next to other people, and I thought, I need to do better than this. And so I enrolled in a sexual counseling course for a year, and I did that course. And then I kind of combined my life coaching with my sexual counseling skills to become the midlife sex coach for women. And I love doing this. Working with women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, it's a wonderful time. It's like the time where we finally get to say, what is it about us that I want? Am I getting all the pleasure that I want in life? And how is my sex life? How's sexual intimacy? And I can have more. And so I love working with women in midlife. It's great.
It's fantastic. And I think also by specialising in this, you probably get to have the biggest impact as well, don't you? Because there are some issues in midlife. Women do struggle in midlife. Many women do, not all women, but many women do. So I think if you're able to, come in there and have these honest conversations and open up the dialogue and, the conversations, it's so powerful.
It's so true. I want for all women to be sexual and having sexual intimacy and enjoying themselves into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the midlife is the time that determines whether that's going to happen or if it's going to kind of shut down, right? So at this point, we have a lot going on in our lives. We're raising the kids, we're figuring out our career, we've got our relationship as well. We're juggling a lot of balls at the same time. And this is the time that we have to prioritize ourselves and say that this is an important issue to work on so that we can have that sexual intimacy that we want into our later years. But now is the time that we work on it so we can enjoy it later.
Because I think there is this kind of narrative out there, isn't there, that goes with menopause and so many things, and that I'm trying to change, you're trying to change, that,
we all sort of fall off a cliff, and sometimes people think about, the sex life just falling off a cliff. I tell you, I was on a podcast with 3 American men, and I was doing a man's guide to menopause, and I kept trying to tell them all these things about menopause, and all they wanted to talk about was sex. just what's happened to my sex life, and what am I going to do about this, and sex. And I was like, my goodness me, there's so much more. It's not just about sex. But there is this perception, isn't there, that it all goes kaput.
Well, I call menopause the second puberty for women, right? Our bodies shift, and I'm 53, so I've gone through menopause. Our bodies shift. Things are changing. We're not reacting the same way we did previously. Things that we enjoyed and stimulated us don't necessarily stimulate us the same way, with maybe issues with lubrication. And then there's this issue of vaginal atrophy that a lot of people are not talking about. All these things contribute, and if we don't know and don't understand what's happening with our bodies, we might make the choice that, there's something wrong with our body, or our libido's no longer there, or I'm in my 50s now, so I guess that means I don't have sex anymore. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case. I really need to say that you can have fabulous sex after menopause. It gets better. I can tell you, it gets better. So definitely, but these are issues that we do need to address, right? We need to understand that if you're having issues and concerns physiologically, then you need to go talk to your gynecologist. But there's things that can be done. You can look into hormone replacement either locally in the vaginal area or systemically. But there's a lot of different options, and that's not the only options. Maybe it's just like a matter of making sure that you have lubricant on your bedside table every night, if you're going to engage in sex. These are the type of practical things, but you can really have a wonderful sex life after menopause.
And there's also the thing that, so many of us, I think, and I think men are particularly guilty of this, that sex means penis in vagina.
Right.
It's
yes.
P-O-V.
Yes. yes.
And that, anything else doesn't seem to count. And I don't understand this mentality at all.
Well, this is a very interesting thing. So penis and vagina, when men think about sex, that's what they think about, because that's the main reason why they're engaging in sex, is for the pleasure associated with penis and vagina sex. Women have many reasons for engaging in sex and sexual intimacy. It may be about having an orgasm and pleasure. It may be about intimacy and closeness. It may be because they want to connect more so with their partner, but there's many other reasons that are involved here. And then I'm going to talk to you about this concept of the pleasure gap, right? Men tend to have if we're talking about penis and vagina sex, men will have an orgasm, will have a lot of pleasure in this, right? It's like 15 to 20% of women will have an orgasm by penetrative sex alone, where I'm just saying the penis in the vagina. The majority of women need stimulation to their clitoris in order to have an orgasm and to really enjoy sexual intimacy, right? So if we add in, you have penis and vagina sex and stimulation to the clitoris, then we're still talking about, there's still this gap here where men are enjoying sex and having orgasms at a rate of 85% and women at a rate of 63%. So there's a pleasure gap here, right? And so part of that is associated with a bias that men have to come and men have to have this pleasure. And then sometimes women think it's optimal if they have it, but it's not necessarily a requirement. And so if it's something that you're not getting a lot of pleasure out of, you're okay with it going by the wayside, right? You're okay with saying goodbye to sex if it's not pleasurable. So we do need to have this concept that both partners need to appreciate and value their other partner's pleasure and to make sure it's coming at an equal level. And then you'd be surprised at how much sex women would like to have, So let's decrease that pleasure gap.
So do you find that there is a difference in the midlife sexual response of women, depending on whether they're heterosexual or they're gay?
Well, in terms of the pleasure gap between partners, if they're in a heterosexual type of sexual intimacy or sexual intercourse, there is more of a gap. But if they're in a lesbian situation, they don't have that pleasure gap. So that's something to take into consideration and to think about. So we're not seeing that pleasure gap when it's just two women that are engaged in sexual intimacy versus a man and a woman?
I often think there's perhaps quite a lot we could learn. I mean, I'm a heterosexual woman, I'm married, but, you know, I think there's probably quite a lot that we can learn post-menopause from lesbian women, you know, to help our experience. I don't know, but I'm interested in your experience, whether that has been the case. But obviously, you know, there isn't that gap that there is so much in heterosexual relationships.
Yeah, the importance is the focus on the pleasure, whether you're in a heterosexual relationship or a lesbian relationship, or whatever the relationship it is. It's the focus on both partners having that pleasure, and then also recognizing that things change. Like when you're in this period of midlife, your libido is different than it was previously. So say you're 17, 18, you have more of what we call a spontaneous libido, where you see somebody, you find them attractive, and you're ready to go, right? When you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you may not have that spontaneous libido. You're in a different phase of your life, and you're usually in a different phase of the relationship. That case, you're talking about more of a responsive type of libido, which doesn't mean you've lost your libido. A lot of people think because it's not that wow, bam, bam, you see somebody and you're ready to go, then there's something wrong with you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just more of a responsive libido, which is a great thing if you understand what makes you more interested in sex and kind of identify it and list it out. Then you have an understanding of what's going to make you more interested in going towards sex, whereas there will probably be some other concepts that make you less interested in sex. Like if you had an argument with your partner, you know, if you're very stressed out at work, you know, these things are going to make you if the house is a mess, whatever is your trigger to make you less interested in sex, your libido is going to go down. But on the opposite side, there's things that will increase your libido, and you just need to be aware of that. Do you need to be relaxed first? Do you need to take a bath? You know, do you need to have conversation and make sure that intimacy and the communication is there with your partner before you put the sexual intimacy on it? Do you need to listen to erotica, right? Do you need to watch a little porn? And there's lots of ethical porn out there as well. So those type of things would make you more interested in sex. And then sometimes you don't actually even need to have the libido or the desire for sex there. It may be the case that you start the sexual intimacy process and you have arousal or stimulation to your vulva region, to your clitoris. And that causes your libido to actually increase because you're like having more pleasure, you're enjoying yourself. You're like, oh, wait, I forgot about this. I forgot that I like this. And so then your libido will come back that way. So if you have more of a responsive libido, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what most women experience.
I always think it's rather amusing as well that when there's so many things going on in midlife, aren't there, to distract us and to stop the libido, including the fact that, you know, if we've been married or in a relationship for a long time, we may just be bored.
It could come down to that,
exactly.
You know.
You know, because it's very interesting how, you know, with older women, they get a new partner and there's no problems with
right, boom. Suddenly their spontaneous libido's right back there, you know. And they're like a 16-year-old, like, hey, how you doing? You're looking mighty fine. You know, so it's right. So that's why you haven't lost it. It's still there, right? But if you had a partner for a long period of time, then you need to figure out how to get that spark back, right? And it could be with toys. It could be, I always say that your largest sexual organ is your brain. It's your mind. And so how do you engage your mind again? How do you make that interesting? And how do you get going again? So focus on what turns you on, what interests you talking to your partner. Usually their partner has some interests that you may not even know about and you two have not shared before. And so that's kind of a fun thing to find as well.
Yeah, I think it's like just being curious, isn't it? Curiosity just seems to cure everything, actually.
I'm not sure why they said that curiosity kills the cat, because it didn't.
I was just thinking that as I said it, curiosity kills the cat. But no, well, curiosity in my life, I mean, honestly, it is the source of all inspiration and everything. Now I find it's just, if you stay open and curious about what's going on.
Right.
you can find solutions, can't you?
It's very true. And that's why I love combining my life coach skills with my sexual counseling skills. Because as I say, it's about the mind, right? So I go back to the thoughts with my clients and I'm focused on, what are you thinking about sex? If they're thinking that sex is really boring with their partner, the odds are they're not going to want to be interested in it, or not as often. And so we go back to the thoughts. We're like, how can we make this more interesting? What kind of thought can you think of, to kind of shift you into a more curious or more open? Sometimes I'll ask them, what do you want to feel about it? And then we come up with a thought that might help us to engage in that and to get to a place where we're more interested in sexual intimacy or more interested in exploring different things or adding in toys or whatever it is.
And obviously, as you said, there are some physiological issues as well in midlife. There is, the issue of vaginal atrophy, dryness, but that there are ways to get round those, aren't there?
Yeah. The easiest one is to add lubrication, but I advocate for my clients to self-pleasure or masturbate, because you do need to make sure the blood supply goes to your vulva region. When I talk to your vulva region, that's like anything between your legs, right? So it's the outer lids, it's the inner lids, it's your clitoris, and you have the vulva region, you have the vagina, right? So they are both come together to make your sexual organs, right? And they're both very important. And you want to make sure that you have a good blood supply. The best way to get a good blood supply to that is to masturbate and to make sure the blood gets there, it gets engorged, it keeps everything functioning well. But also at the same time, add on lubrication if you want to, because you do not want to be in a situation where it hurts to have sex. That's not what you want to do. So add on lubrication. I always say like a silicone type of lube, like Uber Lube is a very good lube to use. And so add that, put that at your nightstand, right? So that's also a good thing. So between masturbation or self-pleasure, sometimes there's a lot of negative connotations associated with masturbation, so I prefer the use of the word self-pleasure. And then lubricants, and then contact and check in with your gynecologist to see if you do need some hormone replacement. So, and that can help as well. So all those things combined together can help you have a fabulous sex life. Yes.
I'm not a big fan of the systemic HRT, but I do use the localized estrogen and the vaginal pessaries. I found those really, really helpful.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you've had this experience, but I've read that if you haven't given birth vaginally, vaginal atrophy can be more of an issue post-menopause. And that makes sense to me because, your vagina didn't expand to accommodate a baby's head.
Well, I'm not exactly certain there. That I would refer over to the gynecologist, right? But I know that there's women that have not had children, but that have a very good and fulfilling sex life. So maybe that's an issue, maybe that's not. I refer that over to the gynecologist. But in terms of if you're having any pain with sex, it's definitely unnecessary. It's something to check out with the gynecologist, but to add on lubrication or lubricants to make sure that you're not causing any injury at all to the tissues.
And then the whole self-care, self-pleasure.
Yes.
I think it's so important. So I'm always saying, to women, whether or not you have a partner, think of it as your self-care, your self-pleasure as your self-care, because as you say, you need to keep the blood going to the vulval area to maintain it so that you don't lose it, so that use it or lose it becomes use it or lose it whether or not you have a partner.
Exactly. It's something that's very important. And I always say your best sexual partner is yourself. That should be your first sexual partner, because you need to have an intimate relationship with yourself. You need to understand about your body and what stimulation you enjoy and where your pleasure comes from. And I like to talk about the clitoris, which is your pleasure organ, basically. It's got over 8,000 nerve endings, and the only function is for pleasure. It's made for your pleasure. But you need to figure out, do you like to touch the tip? People tend to think that it's just this little tip, because this is the part, the gland or the head of the clitoris is the part that most people are aware of. But you need to recognize that you have like these 4 legs that go down the side of your vulva, that go down the side of your inner and your outer lips, right? And these are part of your clitoris. So this is your entire structure, and then your vaginal opening would be down here, right? So they need to understand that it's not just this tip. So if this tip might be sensitive, maybe it wasn't sensitive in the past, but now it's more sensitive, then try stroking down the legs of the clitoris and see if there's some other area that gives you pleasure. But understand your structure and understand what stimulation you enjoy in your body. And be aware of what the clitoris looks like. It is fabulous.
We'll have a diagram of that for the listeners in the show notes, because the ones who can't see the video of you showing that. So we'll put a diagram. But yes, there is so much more beneath the surface that we don't necessarily know about, isn't there?
Oh, definitely, yes.
And plenty of pleasure to be had, regardless of what the vagina's doing, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So the other thing that I know you do, which I think is just absolutely wonderful, is you actually work in a sex toy shop, don't you?
I used to work in a sex toy shop. Between doing my doctoring and doing my sex coaching, I don't have the time to work there specifically at this time. But yes, I made sure that I really wanted to be able to give my clients the whole package, right? To have a good understanding of the medical, the physiological side of things, but also what's going on in our mind and what's going on in our body, and then how we can utilize different toys to enhance our pleasure, right? So I wanted to get an idea of what type of toys are out there and how to use them and how they can help us. So yes, I do have that as my background as well.
And tell me the name of this store, because I just think it's wonderful.
I used to work, and I still have an association with the Smitten Kitten. It's out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's a fabulous place. It is kind of like a boutique. If you go in there, it's not sleazy in any way. It's a beautiful, calm, peaceful place. It is. It's a wonderful place, and they have a focus on safe toys that are non-toxic. And so anything that you can purchase there, are going to be safe for your body. They're going to be non-toxic. They also have, like, if you actually were to go in their store, they actually have a little library so you can actually educate yourself on different information. And then every one of the employees there have to go through a 6 to 12 week training program so that they have a better understanding of how to answer your questions, in addition to showing you the different sex toys. So they're all basically sex educators as well. So it's a fabulous place, and yes, and I can give you some information and a discount code if you'd like that for that.
Yeah, why not? Certainly for our American listeners, yeah.
Yes.
But I'm a big fan of, there's a store in London, in East London, called Shush. So
Shush. Oh, okay. The next time I get to London, then I have to go and look for Shush. Now you've given me something to look for.
Amazing. It's a woman's erotic emporium. That's what it's called.
I love the name of it already. A woman's erotic emporium.
It is just the most brilliant place, and it's so user friendly. It's just a lovely, warm place to be, and like all the staff are trained. They have workshops, on all aspects of female sexuality, and it's just the most wonderful place. So, I'm a huge fan of toys, as I confessed before we hit record.
Yes.
I only discovered them in my mid-30s. I was like, oh my goodness, why did I wait so long?
But stop beating yourself up about this, because you're going to be sexual into your 90s, right?
Yeah.
So you basically found it in your infancy. You've got like 60 years if you think of it that way.
But, I would say if any woman listening has not experimented with toys, they definitely should, I think. So tell me, if there's a midlife woman who, has never experienced a toy, what toy should she start with?
I would start with a basic vibrator. Like I love the Fun Factory vibrators, and they're originally, I think, out of Germany, or at least out of Europe. So I'm quite sure that you can find them for people that are listening overseas. And we definitely have Fun Factory vibrators in Toys in America as well, in stores in America. So I like the Fun Factory toys. They're very good quality, and they've got a lot of different shapes and sizes, so that's definitely a brand that I like. The We Vibe brand, that's also another brand that I like. And then the Sono, the Lilo Sono brand. Now that's the Sono brand is a clitoral stimulator, which is a little different from a vibrator. But in terms of, I would start with a basic vibrator, and that has multiple speeds on it. Like if you have a vibrator from the 80s or 90s that has one speed, It's time. It's time. And if it goes on batteries, it's time. It's time to get a new one, please. So
it's time to upgrade, isn't it?
yes. Now they're chargeable. They're rechargeable on USB ports, right? And so you just plug it in and you charge it. You can have it always charged and at the ready for you, right? So this is and it has many different vibration patterns on them usually, and they have speeds like higher and lower speeds. Some you'll find that some people like more of a buzzy vibration, zzz, and some like more of a thuddy. So you will figure out where and there you like your vibration, and then the different patterns that you would choose as well. So there's so many different things that you can get in terms of a vibrator, but this basic vibrator would be one that you could put on your vulva region, and you can explore your vulva region and get an idea if you like it. And then there's other things that you can add in on there as well, but that would be the basic. And I like the Volta if we're talking about the Fun Factory brand.
But they're also great for using with a partner, aren't they?
Oh, I advocate using it with a partner. I was talking about the pleasure gap. How to get around the pleasure gap very often is about making sure you have clitoral stimulation when you're having penetrative sex. So you talk about men are so interested in penis and vagina sex, which, hey, if I had a penis, I'd probably be very interested in penis and vagina sex. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the thing is, make sure you know where a woman's clitoris is and how she likes it stimulated, and do not take any type of offense at all if she brings a vibrator into the bed, to stimulate. She's helping you out, right? Because she's going to get pleasure. You're going to get pleasure. She's going to enjoy herself. She's going to want to do it again. Now, if she doesn't bring that vibrator in and she really doesn't get a chance to stimulate her clitoris the way she likes it stimulated, then she might not be as interested in sex again with you. So think this over and decide, is it your ego, or are we going to focus here on pleasure?
Exactly. It's not threatening, is it?
No.
If you just focus on the pleasure, it really doesn't have to be at all. I think men need to get with that particular program.
I was going to say we need to also separate. Men are wonderful. They care a lot about their partner, and they see it as a reflection upon themselves as a man. How well they are in the bedroom, and can they provide that pleasure to their partner. But they also have this concept that they alone are the only ones that can provide this pleasure. I advocate that women need to take responsibility for their own pleasure, and then come together and work on this together. And it does not necessarily need to reflect on how good a man is, if the partner gets off or not. That kind of raises the stakes that don't need to be there, right? And that adds for a stressful situation instead of just enjoying yourself and everybody having fun.
Yeah. And something that I have discovered particularly is, post-menopause. I'm the same age as you, so we're both 53. And but is that a vibrator will help get me going.
Yes.
Much more quickly than if we just kind of leave it to chance. It's like somehow it cranks me up somehow so much more quickly. Before I've kind of gone, I'm thinking about next week's shopping list.
Yes, exactly.
It keeps me in the moment,
right,
and gets me going,
and gets you going,
and then we just go off. And it's all fine.
And then if your partner realizes it before you know it, they're gifting you with new vibrators. You're like, oh, thank you. And they're like, oh, look, it's Valentine's Day. We got a coupon to the like that type of thing. So once they get it, they're definitely on board. But, that goes back to my concept of the libido. And there's lots of things that influence your libido, one of them being arousal. So if you stimulate yourself, get to a place of arousal, then you notice, as you said, your libido kicks in. And then you're like, oh, I forgot how good this feels. Oh, I think I'm interested in sex right now. And in terms of self-pleasure and masturbation, it's about priming the pump, right? Yes. It's not one of these use it or lose it. And if you masturbate too often, then you're not going to be interested in sex. It's just the opposite. You're kind of reminding your body, this is pleasurable and I like doing this. And then you're thinking, oh, I'd like to do this with a partner. This have a different kind of experience. So it primes the pump and it gets you more interested in it.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. I just love this. It's fantastic. So let me see. And what about if if you're working with a woman for whom, you know, sex has completely gone off the agenda, and I know there are a lot of couples out there to whom that happens, and then they don't talk about it. It's the elephant in the room.
It definitely is.
And I've always thought that, you know, when sex is good, it's a very small part of a relationship. When sex is bad, it's a massive part of a relationship, isn't it?
Very much so. Yes.
And so what advice do you have there for trying to get it back on the agenda and for helping a woman who perhaps hasn't had sex with her beloved, if they're still their beloved, for like years?
Well, okay, you brought up a number of different important things. So the first thing is, what is the relationship like? Is it that it's a loving, kind, giving relationship, but there's just not sex there? Because if that's the case, then it's easier to build the communication and then the overall intimacy and then add on the sexual intimacy to it. But if you're starting with a relationship where you're resentful or you don't like the person or that type of thing, then that part needs to be fixed. Because it doesn't matter how much I work with you and how I change your mind and get you interested. I can get you to the place where you're having lovely sex with yourself and you're having a great relationship with yourself, but you're still not going to want to share that sexual intimacy with your partner if you're not in a loving, kind relationship. So that has to be there too. So sometimes I will talk to my clients and advocate for them to also get relationship counseling if they need that. So the first thing is to look at the relationship. Is it just that somehow the sexual intimacy has been lost, or is there a lot more going on there? That being said, then it's a matter of working with my client. And then it also depends on what is the reason behind the sexual intimacy being lost. A lot of people think it's, women, their libido is gone, and so now they're not having sex anymore. But actually, a higher percentage of the time where a relationship no longer has sexual intimacy may have to do with a male sexual dysfunction. If we're talking about a relationship with a heterosexual relationship, and there's some sort of sexual dysfunction, and they either have like erectile issues or premature ejaculation. Now, if these type of issues are going on, and it has shut down the sexual side of things, and that's something that needs to be addressed as well. And I mainly work with the women, but there's urologists, and then there's also sexual counselors and sex coaches and sex therapists that can help the men to deal with the issues that they have to deal with. So it's also important to not just assume that the problem is on the side of the woman, because most of the time when the sexual intimacy completely ends, then it has to do a lot with men's concept of the performance and how they are as a man. Having said that, I need to make sure people are aware that you can have wonderful sexual intimacy even if you don't have an erection, right? And you can have orgasms. A man can still have an orgasm even without an erection. So there's a lot still that can happen, and you can still have a really good life. A sexual intimacy life. You can do strap-ons. There's a lot of things. And then you can also, the man can go to the urologist and also deal with that issue as well. Now, having said all that background, now I'm going to get to talking about what I deal with my clients. So yes, I often deal with clients that are having sex maybe once a year or not having sex, and they have not had sex for a really long time. If that's the case, then we have to go back to this place where we start talking about what are your concepts of sex, what do you think is going on, and we work on that side, right? We work on the mind. But while we're working on the mind, we're also trying to prime the pump and get the body back to used to having sexual pleasure, right? So then in that case, then I'm working with them to start masturbating and to start enjoying themselves and to find general pleasure and then move that over to sexual pleasure, right? So that is like another thing that I work on with my clients. And so then we kind of bring it to the next level. But I also, if it's the case that the sexual intimacy ended or stopped because there's pain, now that's another issue, and that needs to be dealt with your gynecologist. And so this is not, sometimes they'll come to me and they've been bearing the pain, and they're just like, I have sex once a month, I don't enjoy it, it's very painful, and I just kind of get through it. I'm like, no, stop, because right now you're having a lot of negative connotations associated with sex, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do that is sexual intimacy that is not specifically penetration. And while you're having the intimacy side, the sexual intimacy things, then you can go to the gynecologist and work on what might be causing the pain side of things. So then that's another layer of, is there pain involved with sex that we need to kind of sort out there? And we have physical therapists as well if you're having pelvic floor dysfunction and vaginismus, or your muscles are too tight. So there could be a lot of different reasons for this pain. Is it vaginal atrophy associated with menopause, then there's different, whatever the issue is that can be figured out. But I work with my clients on the mental side of things. So while they're working on getting the physiological side of things, the physical side of things sorted out, then I also work with them. Okay, so now you've developed this thing where you've had this experience where you have pain with sex, so now you don't want to have sex. So let me help you shift your concept of sex, and let's start to see it in a more positive light. And can we take the penetrative sex off the table, but keep the cuddling and the making out and the mutual masturbation? Let's keep those things there and make sure that we can build this sexual intimacy and then go from there.
And how much do you think that society's ageist narratives impact how women in particular respond to being sexual beings in midlife and beyond?
Then you have to look at society's concept of what is a sexy woman or what is a sexual person, right? And very often it's somebody in their 20s or 30s, a woman, and gaddily dressed, and she's tall, and she has a size 4 dress, American size 4 dress on. There's a concept of what is sexy. And very often, midlife women don't necessarily look like in the United States, at least, the average model is about 5'10" and wears a size 2 or a size 4 in dress. And the average American is 5'4" and wears a size 14 dress, right? So there's this disconnect here, right? So it's hard to, if you're using the standards of beauty and sexiness that society would like to impose, then it's hard for you to get this concept that you are a sexual being and that you deserve sexual pleasure, right? So I work a lot with my clients on body image. That's something that's very important. And I really work on them that they are a sexual being. And we work and we talk on that. And we look at valuing our bodies and seeing the beauty that it is our bodies, and recognizing the strength of our bodies and that we are, in fact, sexual beings. And then going from there, because once again, it's the mind, right? And so we have to kind of shift that. If you're in the middle of having sexual intercourse and you're thinking about your roll of fat, you're not enjoying yourself. You're just not, you're all up here going, does he notice my roll of fat? Oh my God, if I do this angle, is this better for my roll of fat? Who cares about your roll of fat? He's probably like, oh, I really like this roll of fat because it's really nice and I like to hold on to it, So we're just wasting time and energy and not enjoying ourselves. So.
Oh, it's brilliant. So where can people find out about your work, Sonia, if they want to come and have a Zoom conversation with you?
They want to have a Zoom conversation with me. They can find me at themidlifesexcoach.com. So that's one of my websites. You can also find me under soniawrightmd.com. And if you want a consultation, you can find me at soniawrightmd.asme, and I'll give you all this information. And I
we'll
definitely
have all the links
in
the show notes.
So I have a sexual intimacy guide that I like to give out, and if people would like to receive that intimacy guide, they could give me their email, and then I'll also be able to give them information about the enrollment of the course that's starting up. So there's many ways to work with me, and definitely I would love to work with people.
Brilliant. So what is your best advice for a midlife woman who believes that her own best sex life is long since gone?
My best advice is that you are going to be the one that determines if you're going to be a sexual being from this point on, right? The wonderful thing about being a woman in midlife is that you're not defined by anybody. You are the person that gets to define yourself, which is what I love about being in midlife. So you get to decide, are you going to be a sexual person? Are you going to enjoy your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s and be sexual throughout that time and have a good time? And I say yes, and I'm hoping you say yes too. And if you need any help with that, I am definitely here to help you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause, and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.